Madison Forum, and you've had the organization for 10, 12 years?
Oh, closer to 18.
18 years, where they do some political discussion, and some high-ranking elected officials in Georgia are members of his organization. And Mr. Favorito is over the Georgia Voter Georgia, and he's got a couple of lawsuits that are pending in Fulton County and the state of Georgia for election integrity. So what they're going to do this evening is present their information to you, because regardless of where you stand on this issue, it's important that we all be informed, and that we can make up our own minds about the information. But the vote is the foundation of our republic. If we don't have confidence in that system, then the rest of it just falls apart. Do you have a question, Neil? So you raise your hand. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Michael. He's going to give you a little bit of background on this is something they've really been involved with for quite some time. It's not just a recent issue. It goes back years ago on the digital voting machines. And this is really all this started. So if you would welcome Michael. I think you're going to start, right? Sure.
Thank you very much for inviting us here to talk to you tonight. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you, because we're all in this together. Yes. It's not just Garland and myself, Dean, we're all in this together. A little bit of background on me. I'm retired from Lucent Technologies and AT&T. I created the data engineering department at Lucent Technologies. I handle national accounts for AT&T in software, data networking, and computers. Retired from that, became a mediator and arbitrator. I started the Madison Forum shortly thereafter. The Madison Forum is an organization focused on good government. It's nonpartisan. We're open to all reputable political parties. All right. We don't allow extremists in. We focused on the Constitution. We have discussions. We have speakers come in to speak with us on various topics, and almost anything is related, as you know, to government, whether it's school, whether it's zoning, science. It's wide open. So what we do is that at the forum, we do not debate our speakers, and we get to have interchanges with the speakers, not just one quick question and answer. And we don't argue, we don't debate, we discuss, and we all learn something, and no one is permitted to interrupt. A little mini dialogue. And so I became interested in the Debo voting machines when I first saw one demonstrated at a Cobb County Republican breakfast. And so I monopolized the time and asked about 30 minutes worth of questions on these machines. This was at a breakfast in 2003. And I determined that this thing was very dangerous, very fraudulent. And I began doing research on it, and the more I found out about it, the more concerned I became. And in the process, somehow Garland and I met, and he was invited. I invited him to speak to the Madison Forum on voting machines. And so I learned a lot from Garland. Garland was, he was in charge of e-commerce with SunTrust Bank. And Garland's a bit more of a techie than I am. And so we complement each other. And soon we started giving presentations together around the state of Georgia on the Debo voting machines. And so we go back that far, he and I giving joint presentations. We haven't been very effective because here we are still talking about the voting machines. But it's been a hard thing to get across to people because it's hard to understand how a voting machine can be subverted. But I said early on, somewhere around 2005, I started learning so much about it. I said, listen, if I were the premier of China, I could spend $50 million. And as these machines propagate around the United States, I could subvert national elections. This would be very easy. It wouldn't be hard at all. And that was back during 2005, 2006. And we met with some skepticism. A lot of people nodded their heads yes. But a lot of people just listened. And even though We thought we might gain some traction. We didn't gain a whole lot of traction, not like what we had hoped, that people would rise up and voice concerns. And by the way, we have about 350 Madison Forum members. Not everybody comes to our luncheon, but one of our notable Madison Forum members is Governor Brian Kemp. Now, we have met, Garland and I and several others have met with the Governor Kemp back when he was Secretary of State, and we voiced our concerns on the Devo voting machines at that point with him. When he comes to speak at the Madison Forum, we do not corner him. We express our concerns. He answers our concerns from his standpoint, and we have a positive relationship. Not everybody in the Madison Forum, we don't look for groupthink. We look for people with different perspectives on any given issue so we can learn. None of us have all the answers, although we'd like to think that we do, but we know we don't. And so for us to grow, we have to learn, and the best way to learn is from each other. Dean Kelly is a Madison Forum member. John Dashler back there is a Madison Forum member. Paul Malley is a Madison Forum member, and he is one of the, I consider him a national expert on the grand jury system. And he's been talking about that for years and years, and it's a hard road, but he's making progress. He's got people in New York and people in Florida talking about it. So we cover a lot of things, and the Madison Forum is open to everybody. We only ask that you come and visit with us once to see if you like us, and we meet you, and hopefully we'll like you too. And the dues are $25 a year. And our website is www.madisonforum.org. It's a good learning website. And invite you to go, invite you to come to our luncheons. We meet them the last Saturday of each month there in Woodstock at Semper Fi Restaurant. But everybody is welcome. The guests have to sit and listen because we have a protocol. We have a high sense of decorum. So we've never had a breakdown with all the different political perspectives. We've never had a blow at the Madison Forum. And that's good. I'm proud of that. So, and that's the kind of people that we attract. And I get my batteries charged at our meetings. I learn as much as anybody does learn. But getting back to the voting machines, we've been doing this since, the interest 2003, and Garland and I have been doing this at least 15 years. You think, my God, can't you people, achieve something here? Well, we're starting to achieve something. In this last election, all of a sudden, a lot of people started waking up and started paying attention to what we have. The Depot voting machine it had no audit trail, it had no paper trail. You could not verify your vote. And I used to liken it to going up to a voting booth, someone behind the curtain like the Wizard of Oz, and say, I want to vote for John Smith, and go, okay, gotcha. Got your vote. Thank you very much. Goodbye. That's the effect of the old voting machine. You had no confirmation that whomever you voted for counted. Just didn't count. So, but we lived with that. And we were perplexed. How was it determined which elections were thrown, which people were elected, and which people were not elected because of the voting machine? And that still remained a mystery to us. So more has come out in the last year with these new Dominion voting machines manufactured in Venezuela, sold to the highest bidders around the world to manipulate elections, and that's one of the ways they make their money. All the chips are made in China. Okay? The software, goodness knows who writes that, but the software has to be written to interface with the machine. So there had to be tight collaboration with the chip manufacturers and manufacturing the machine. And if you're the premier of China, you go, wow, what power do I have? So, remember, by the way, did you just hear the Chinese landed a spacecraft on the moon? I'm not sorry, Mars. Mars. Yeah. And you remember how that got started? Somebody talked Ronald Reagan into letting the Chinese launch our rockets. And said, don't worry, our technology remains the same. Moral Burrell Industry gave them the keys to the rocket technology, and because we did that, they now have a platform on Mars, and you see what they've done around the world. We have given them everything, including our industry, anything they wanted, we've given it to them. Panama Canal. So now they have their influence with the voting machines, and we've seen what's happened in this last election. Garland and I, before Brad Raffensperger, he did speak at Madison before, and I invited him to speak. Garland and I had a private meeting with Brad Raffensperger, and we told him about the machines, all about all the machines and the options that the Dominion machines, and they were bad machines, stay away from them. So it wasn't that he did not know, didn't know. And Donald Trump sent an envoy down. Who saw the debate in the Senate on the Dominion voting machines and whether they needed to allocate money for the Dominion voting machines, the pros and the cons, you had the Democrats on one side and the Republicans on the other side. Who saw that video, or was there? Well, I watched that and I was just astounded. I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe it. And Donald Trump had sent an envoy down saying, please don't buy these machines. And the Republicans acted like the Democrats, and the Democrats acted like the Republicans. It was so bad. The questions, the answers were so bad. I couldn't sit there and watch it all the way through. And I told a friend of mine who occupied a position with the Cobb County Republican Party how bad it was. He said, I can't believe that. So I sent him the link. He watched it. He said, I could only watch it maybe halfway through and I had to turn it off. There were people making decisions and asking questions that were just not on point. And we ended up getting the machines. And I asked the state legislator, I said, why did you vote for a machine? And you have to listen to these people. You have to listen to them very ear. I said, why did you vote for these machines? He said, we didn't vote. I didn't vote. We didn't vote for these machines. I said, I beg your pardon. We got them. State legislature. You didn't vote for them? No, we just voted to allocate the money. Oh. That's the answer. That's the answer. So when you talk to these people, and they go, I didn't know. They knew. They knew everything they needed to know. I saw it in the questions that they asked in the Senate hearings. They knew. One of the things they do is they pretend they don't know, and they're oh so nice. Oh, I'm so glad you told me about that. I even had one of them say, Michael, you know so much. Would you write me a 3 or 4 page paper on this so I can understand it better? I don't think so. He understood it perfectly. So they do this. These are the games they play with us. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what is happening. I was invited to be on Brad Carter's election integrity committee. Who's familiar with that? Okay. Well, it's looking at all the changes that and recommendations that needed to be made to improve our whole system of election. Everything. And surprisingly enough, when you're on a committee like this, 20 people, we met from 3 o'clock one day to 8:15 the next day, and then during the week we all collaborated. We had our assignments, and then we met again on a Saturday from 3 o'clock to 8:15, and it was a hard-working group. And surprisingly enough, a lot of good stuff came out of there and was incorporated in the 202 legislation. But there were some things that were not incorporated. And to my surprise, though, they asked me to write my assessment of the voting machines. Well, a lot of people already knew what my assessment of the voting machines were, but I wanted to do a good job. And one of the things that came out in our meeting, that we looked at the states, discussed the states that have excellent voting systems, Iowa and Florida. So I called the Secretary of State's, before I wrote my report, I called the Secretary of State's office in Iowa, and Florida, spoke with the attorney in the Secretary of State's office in Iowa, and they have a good system. They've got it online on video, so you can go and take a look at it. And bottom line, they use manual input. Fill in the blank, fill in the bubble, like the old Scantron systems that we used to use in Cobb County. Use them for ACT scores, SAT scores. When I taught at Kennesaw State, I used those to grade the paper. Inexpensive, great system. But that's the way they used the machine that they had, and the ballot, when it was scanned in, dropped into a sealed box, and that thing had security, really good security. So then I called the Secretary of State's office in Florida and spoke with the person who was in charge of the voting machines. There they used ESS and Dominion, but they used manual inputs, and they only used the machines to scan the ballots, kind of like the old Scantron, inexpensive Scantron. And I recommended that's the direction we should go. Use the touchscreens only for handicapped people who need to do that, have that kind of access, and turn the rest of it, 75% back in to Dominion. And I don't know who wrote the contract, I don't know whether they bought the machines directly from Dominion. It'd be interesting to go through that whole scenario, but just go with the best systems that we can find, and we'll eliminate a lot of the voting problems. Manual input. And by the way, these machines can be networked. I think we all know that. If they're connected, one machine has access to the internet, they all have access to the internet. And then that takes us back to another. Let me do a digression. I ran for Congress in 2012, and on a shoestring budget, okay, just to speak to the issues. And so as we were watching the returns coming, Garland was there and several other folks on the laptop, and I'm watching the returns coming from the Secretary of State's offices. You know, the system looks pretty good here. And he said, well, you know, you're not looking at, who's watched the returns come in from the Secretary of State's office on their computers? All right, I said, two guys. Garland said, that's not coming from the Secretary of State's office. And I said, well, Secretary of State's website. No, it's coming from a little company down in Florida. It's privately owned, and that company is owned by a larger company headquartered in Spain. Now this was back in 2012. Remember what you heard on the news about these companies in Spain and other places controlling the vote? This company in Spain, privately held, word was that Soros owned it, or a large portion of it. I couldn't prove it, but it was privately held in Spain. But Garland said, this is coming from that Spanish company down in Florida, privately held. And so even though it looked like it was coming from the Secretary of State's website, there was no disclaimer on it. It came from them. And I asked my friend Brian Kemp, who is Secretary of State at the time, he spoke to the Madison Forum, he said, yes, he paid a sum of money, I'm not going to quote the sum here, of money, to have them handle the tabulation, okay, of the ballots. And then they projected it back to us. All right, but that was not the Secretary of State's website, and the Secretary of State wasn't doing the tabulation. This private company down there was. So anyway, I won't go into the details. It gets even more interesting from there. But just wanted to give you a little bit of background. Garland and I, he's just been a fantastic teammate, and he is the leader. He has a case going right now, and Garland is the one who started this with Fulton County. And who's familiar with the Fulton County lawsuit? Okay, well, Garland's going to speak on this, but he's doing it, and I'm a Republican. Garland's a member of the Constitution Party. Constitution Party in Garland, and he's funding this thing. Asking for donations, and we need it. And I'm a member of his team that will be helping count the ballots, and it's under a judge, a state judge. This is really rather incredible what Garland has put together. And driving up, he was listening to the deposition as we drove up, and he had me taking notes, because he couldn't. That was the problem, me taking notes. I'd hard enough time reading my own writing, usually on the car. You're going to be challenged. But Garland is that dedicated. He's been on this for this number of years, and he's taken this lead, and nobody else is. Now, he's got a lot of people around him. He's got a judge overseeing all of this, and he'll tell you about it. But he has just done absolutely incredible work, and I am honored to be on the same platform with Garland Favorito. If you give a hand.
I'd like to put the pressure on the public establishment of anybody in the state of Georgia about this issue. They're also responsible for the Dominion in Grant Congress report, the DOD report. He was responsible for the state of South Carolina doing the change, as you said, as well as the biological devices. So, amazing background. Thank you, Michael. Listen, I'm really excited to be here tonight. We've been trying to put this together for months, but I've been so busy and haven't been able to pull off. But tonight we did it. I had to listen to Ralph Jones' deposition all the way up here. It was still going on at 6:25. We were talking about it. We're supposed to be presented at 6:30. But before we start, I have to recognize one very, very special person in the ring, and that is one of my co-plaintiffs who's here tonight, Stacey Jones. Stacey, would you say hello? So thank you. So you guys are represented up here in very, very, very good hands. I'm going to jump right into this because we don't get up here. We have to dive in an hour and a half. You're going to get my full-blown 45-minute presentation, like it or not. So no holds barred on this one. Thank you, John. I appreciate you coming tonight. I feel like I'm at home here along some of the faces. So what we'll cover tonight is a little bit about the pre-2020 election, world history, what happened in the 2020 general election, was there real evidence of election fraud? You know, we keep hearing that there was no evidence. In fact, Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan went on CNN and said his whole thing was a lie. He has the information. I sent it to his personal email. He knows exactly what's going on in the state of Georgia. As Michael said, they know better, but they lie. So, but we'll take care of that at some point in time. So anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about what was there fraud, and if so, what our LA was doing about it, which you're not going to be too happy about that. VoterJ is I'm told, nonpartisan, all volunteer organization. Nobody gets attended. I live off Social Security all the time. So no money goes to anybody other than legal fees, expert witnesses, all that stuff. So if you do donate, it is a 501c3. Stands for Voters Organized for Trusted Election Results in Georgia. That was our original name back in 2006. So again, nonpartisan, all volunteer. Oops. Now we'll do this the hard way. I thought my mouse was working. So, how did we get to this point? Michael kind of started to sum it up. So back in 2002, I wrote to the Secretary of State's and the system evaluators for the VMO machine that Michael was talking about. And I said, I think these machines are going to be unconstitutional if you buy them because they produce results that can't be verified, can't be audited, can't be recounted. Basically, you just touch the screen and your vote's gone. I said, I don't think that's legitimate. Secretary of State Kathy Cox at the time ignored me, and then she went ahead and bought the machines. But before they had to do that, before she could do that, the General Assembly had to legalize voting that did not have an independent auditor of each vote count. So we had a law that said that any voting machine that you purchase or evaluate has to have an independent auditor of each vote count. Great law, and you had to remove that law to legalize that form of unverifiable voting in 2002. Keep that in mind, it's going to come back and haunt us again now. So Secretary of State ignored the warnings and bought the machines anyway. And my mouse is not going to cooperate.
And that was Kathy Collins.
Kathy Cox, yes, she brought it in. Then, as you might remember, so we first of all, we sued. We took the case to went all the way to Georgia Supreme Court, and they denied our constitutional claims. And the legal reason was that they refused to apply strict scrutiny to your constitutional right to vote. And that's how they blew us off. So after Kathy Cox, we had Karen Handel. Karen Handel did this beautiful little basics report. She understood the issue and could articulate the problem with the machines better than I could. Got it. She totally got it. We were looking forward. I was in support of her at the time. She did a white paper. I was looking forward to working with her on doing something. As soon as she got elected, 180-degree backflip. And she said that we had the safest and most secure system in the entire country. It's not familiar. This is 2006. Actually 2009 when she made that point. Then along came Brian Kemp in 2012, I believe it was. He was appointed by Governor Perdue, ran once and then re-elected a second time because he can serve 2 full terms. So he actually served around 9 years as Secretary of State. He said he was going to lead the charge when someone introduced a bill to fix this problem. This is when he was campaigning for his first election. And I said, that's good because I know there's a bill going to be introduced in 2 weeks. Sure enough, the bill was introduced by Tim Bearden of Rico, and sure enough, Brian Kemp, 180-degree backflip, refused to support the bill, said it cost too much money. At that time, it cost over $20 million to replace the machines. So you can kind of see what Michael is talking about here. Fast forward all the way to 2019 for our last little bit of history. U.S. District Court banned the system as unconstitutional in 2019. This is the old system, agreeing with what I had said 17 years earlier. They said, yeah, you were right, Georgia Supreme Court was wrong, they overrode it, they are unconstitutional. So that made me very happy, although I wasn't that involved in that lawsuit. We had quite a few Madison Forum members of work.
I'd like to give a shout out to Marilyn Marks. She funded that lawsuit. We're proud she's a Madison Forum member, and she did that.
Yes, she did.
And I introduced, when she moved to the Carolinas from Colorado, I'm proud that I introduced Garland and Marilyn. So that's right, I did. And so they collaborated very well, and Garland was very helpful.
And yeah, that lawsuit is known as Garland v. Raffensperger. It's still going on, and it may well be the instrument that throws these dominion machines out of Georgia. So they're still alive, and they are doing exactly what Michael said. They're trying to get the ballot market license out, only for disabled people, because there's a lot of security issues around that. I have a report on votergm.org tab, where you can, it's a news tab, you can get a report about that. So finishing up the history, David Ralston and Barry Fleming passed this bill called House Bill 316 in 2019. That gets my vote for the most atrocious bill ever passed in the Georgia General Assembly, and there have been some bad ones. We all can probably think of a couple. But this bill did the same thing it did in 2002. Michael and I told Brad Raffensperger at a personal meeting where he spoke at the...
Just the 3 of us.
It was just the 3 of us. After the meeting, he was pretty sick that day, but he came and spoke, and then we talked to him at the restaurant for a few minutes, and we laid out all the machines, what were good, what were bad, what were characteristics. And one of the things we told him was, don't buy a machine that accumulates votes that are encapsulated in a QR code or a barcode. Do not buy that. It's not verifiable. Nobody can read QR codes, and these you can't read them because they're encoded. Even if you have a barcode reader, you still couldn't read it. So we told him, don't buy that. As you can see, he ignored us, and he bought them. But before he bought them, as Michael was saying earlier, the legislature had to appropriate the money and to they legalized unverifiable voting using QR codes. That was against the law. You couldn't have that system. So in order to do this, it's a huge argument. We went back and forth on this for a while, and here's the irony of the thing, as Michael was saying, the Republicans sounded like Democrats, and the Democrats sounded like Republicans. It was an amazing thing. So to give you an example, we got an amendment to on the new bill, which came out before House Bill 316. It was called Senate Bill 403, which did not pass in 2018. But we got an amendment on that bill in the Senate Ethics Committee, thanks to Michael Williams at the time, and he was, and also Josh McCoon. They got this amendment passed, and they said, I agree with you on that. They said that that kind of voting is outlawed, and they all passed, and they all agreed. It passed the committee unanimously, it passed the Senate, and it was all, they all agreed, all the Republicans agreed outlawed. The next year, this bill came in, no Republican wanted to introduce it again, so we got a Democrat to introduce it in the Senate Ethics Committee, Sally Hill. Sally introduced almost word for word the same amendment that Michael had put in the same committee the year before, and the same Republicans who voted for Michael's amendment voted against Sally's amendment with the same wording, and that's how they legalized unverifiable voting in Georgia once again, and that opened the door to buy another corrupt unverifiable system. Except for the fact that this system cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and the old system only cost $54 million. This system obligated us to pay $150 million upfront, another $100 million over 10 years. It's an unfunded mandate on the counties, and the reason for that is you got, with these marking devices, you have logistics, you have training, you have licensing, you have maintenance, you have testing, huge expenses to maintain all of the marking devices when you can, as Michael said, just do manual input or have archaic ballots, which the experts also warned the legislature that these were more secure than the ballot marking devices. And of course, they would have saved hundreds of millions of dollars because that system would have cost maybe $50 million. And we ended up obligating $250, actually $300 million for the system that we have now. So they chose not to buy the most secure system, which could either be hand-marked ballots or ballot on demand, either one. They never even looked at ballot on demand. We tried to get them to look at that. That would have been a very nice solution. All which would also be cheaper. But they bought it anyway, and here's the kicker. Not only that, they financed the money, $40 million of interest, but they took out a 20-year bond for a system that has a 10-year shelf life. So that would give the taxpayer, we pay for this system 10 years after its useful life. It's over, it's going to be paid interest on that bond. And in 10 years, everybody will forget that it actually happened.
And one other thing I'd like to add, it's pretty well accepted that computer technology has a current lifespan of 3 to 4 years before it's outdated by another. So we're looking at buying a system to add single-digit numbers. Okay, a big computer system to add single-digit numbers, not doing any complex mathematical calculation. Over 10 years, financed for 20 years. Now, Dean is a financial analyst. All right, tell me what financial analyst, reputable financial analyst, would you know that would recommend a company make such an investment? So then you say, well, why is that? And I'm going to leave that to your imagination, why they would do that. So, I'm sorry, Garland.
That's okay. So fast forward, I'm going to go, what were my goals in the 2020 election? I was a state farm and land observer. Oh, that's going to be interesting. We'll talk about that. I was a Fulton tabulation observer at the warehouse where they calculate the ballots. I was an audit monitor. I was a recount monitor. And our co-founder, Ricardo Diaz and I, organized a bunch of monitors for around the it, we had probably, maybe 100 different monitors in dozens of counties, excuse me. So, I noticed a few things when I was doing this. First of all, the way I got into this is I was looking at, I was observing the tabulation, and I went back and I looked at the results, and all of a sudden, Joe Biden had a $20,000 spike, and the fear that Donald Trump's supposed to gone down at the same time. That didn't look right, so I asked the former county, give me an open office request on the interim results. I want to see each interim results, because maybe I'm just crazy that these, maybe, but it doesn't look right. So they ignored it, they never answered that open records request. And then, in fact, I notified the elections director, the board, the attorney, and I knew who to contact. So apparently I notified all those, but never got a response. So then we were audit monitors, and by the way, that was one of the things that drove the suit originally. So when we were audit monitors, we noticed 3 boxes of 100% Biden ballots in Fulton County. And that's mathematically or statistically just about impossible. You have even in a county that's 2/3.
When you say ballots, do you mean like mail-in ballots or?
Yes. These were all mail-in ballots. And we have since found out it's not just Fulton County. There are other counties that have even more boxes of 100% Biden ballots, which is a mathematical impossible statistic.
Who did that? Who broke them?
Well, that's what we're trying to find out. That's what we're suing for. That's actually why the deposition I was going on today, we're trying to find that out. So we intend to figure that one out in due time. So the way this whole thing got started, there were 4 auditors, excuse me. You've probably seen Susie Walls on TV, but there were 4 of them all together. They all said, these are counterfeit ballots. We've got counterfeit ballots in this group. So, and I know Susie and Barbara Harvey as well, we know. So, they raced down, and this was November 13th, November 15th. So they went down on Sunday and they put in these sworn affidavits to some attorneys who were working with renewal. So I kicked back, I said, okay, thank you. That's the good to carry that now. I'm going to get that good. I figured this out. Well, that's how. Then did the signature matching lawsuit, but he didn't do anything with these affidavits. So time went on. I tried to get the Thomas Wood Society involved in this. We wanted to go in a different direction with a different lawsuit, a U.S. Supreme Court challenge on something rather rhetorical. But we didn't have to file ourselves. So we said, okay, somebody's got to file this lawsuit. And so that was when I contracted Todd Harding, who took our other case to the Supreme Court, and he said, I got to help you out on this, and his name is Sean Drain, so he's going to co-plan it. You'll probably hear more and know about Sean, but Sean is very nice in the inspection. He's kind of been doing so much behind the scenes. I just to say there are 500 people who are all doing amazing things behind the scenes, which I could go on about all day. So anyway, how did they know that it was counterfeit? Okay, they were mailing ballots, but they didn't have a phone mark. They didn't mail. They were marked with a toner. They weren't marked with a writing instrument. So like a mailing ballot has to be marked, and a paper stock was printed. So for those reasons, we figured these look like counterfeit. So, you're going to hear this. So I want to address this. I like to address questions that you do all the time, so that you have the answer. You've heard this thing. Well, didn't we count the votes 3 times in this election already? Well, not exactly. First of all, if you remember, we didn't really count. It was just accumulating votes that were in barcodes and unverified. So all we did was print unverified results. That was because they were in the barcode. When the president ordered the recount, they did the same thing again because the state election board said, well, if we count a race, we can just reaccumulate that same barcode again. And we said, no, you gotta manually count it. That's not a legitimate recount, but again, they noticed and they did that anyway. So, fortunately, there was one little thing in the law that kind of saved us, and that was they said that we'll have to audit one race every 2 years. And we said, oh, okay, that's actually not bad, but what about the other, 50 races? Okay, you audit one statewide federal race every 2 years. That means that no local races are audited, no state rep races are audited, no state senate races are audited, no judicial races are audited, no nonpartisan races are audited, no municipal races are audited. Nothing else is audited. So ever, period. So how is that good? So, but the Secretary of State had to pick one race to do an audit on, and he picked the presidential race under tremendous pressure. So he says, we've got to audit the presidential race because there's too much question about it. So he did pick that, and he did do a hand count audit, a full hand count audit this race. So, the problem with this is that the hand count audit was flawed in the way that he set it up, and it was flawed audit. So the few trials that you're talking about were, aside from the fact that you have to be 6 feet away, the lines have to be 6 feet away, so you couldn't check the counterfeit ballots. So all they did was recount the counterfeit ballots again, twice. The first problem was when you had the table set up, you're supposed to have a Democrat and Republican, or somebody from Biden's camp, and somebody from Trump's camp, to check each other. They didn't do that because the Democrats at one table, the Republicans at another table, and all of a sudden we saw at the Democrats table these stacks of microphones down. So nobody could verify that. That was the first problem. Second problem is then they go to monitor and upload the data. The counters still have these tally sheets, piece of paper, so okay, I got 37 votes for Joe Biden, 70 for Donald Trump, or whatever, and then they go and they enter it, this guy, he enters this into a system called Orla. Well, nobody's monitoring what this person was entering, at least not important in DeKalb counties. So they're entering stuff, but nobody knows what they're going to get. Master tally sheets, we don't know the world. We don't think that that's kind of receipts and more information.
Garland, if I may interject here for a moment. I also performed 2 audits there in Cobb County, sat across the table from the Democrat, and we're counting the ballots, the spoiled ballots, and questionable ballots, and writing them down on the tally sheets that Garland was just talking about. Now, the Democrat and I didn't have any arguments, we didn't have any disputes, worked very well together. So after we entered the information on the sheet, put it on top of the ballots, there were 2 county employees then ready to take that information. And before they did, I said, well, aren't we supposed to sign this? And he said, no. I'm a former special agent with the Office of Special Investigations in the Air Force. And chain of custody is pretty important in maintaining the Air Force. And I did a signed sworn affidavit on this. It should have been date and embossed stamp and gone into a secure box. But what it went into were these postal tracks. You all seen pictures of those. Went into those. And that's what we did the whole time. And I didn't get into it with the clerks there because there was nothing to do. Then, just underscoring what Garland said, they took the trays and they moved it over there, out of sight. So, you don't know if somebody just changed the sheets on there because they weren't signed by anybody. You don't know what happened. So I just wanted to reinforce what Garland is saying here, and that was in Cobb County.
So let me just actually, I want to move that pretty well here. I'm going to keep talking.
You want to move?
Yeah, can we do that very well? Because I got to put my computer.